unfortunately. So, but I am so glad that you are here. And what I thought we could do was I could just share a little bit about the history of Charlotte Lewis with Artwise, and we can talk a little bit about her work. But I'd love to hear your stories of Charlotte and maybe your interactions with her, how you knew her, and if you were familiar with any of her artwork. So, and we'll also talk a little bit about philanthropy as well, so, and how important that is. So, okay, well, let's see. Charlotte Lewis was a long-standing artist and musician. Lived in Grand Forks. You can see she was a cellist, and she was also an artist and a big supporter of Artwise. And Rita, how many years was she in the Artwise art show? And maybe Mira, you know that too. It's many years.
Just defer that to you.
I'm not even sure when.
Yeah.
From the 90s.
Yeah.
As long as they're healthy.
Absolutely, an absolute fixture.
Yeah.
So Charlotte had left a donation through the Community Foundation to Artwise as in the form of an endowment when she died in 2011. And that endowment allows for distribution that supports Artwise, the operations of Artwise to a large degree. And has been a great support of Artwise and just a tremendous gift and celebration of her legacy. In the early parts of the last decade, say 2010, 11, 12, and 13, there was a Charlotte Award through Artwise. And I don't think that's been offered recently, but yeah, it might be something to consider, rejuvenating, especially in memory, now that we're a little past the decade.
Yeah.
So this work that we see here is a collection of Charlotte Lewis's work that is in the Artwise collection and from private donations. So as you may notice, the work is on loan. That's right. Oh, and you have some of your works of Charlotte Lewis's in the show as well.
Just one.
Oh, just one. Which is your work that's on in Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much for making that work available to the public.
I was going to mention that's the only one that I have seen that is a complete cutout from one leaf and not layered.
Oh, yeah.
So that makes me wonder if, what else she was doing about that time, because she was, she obviously was experimenting and doing something different.
Rita, you bring up a really good point, and that is in her early work, a lot of her early work is very flat and really focuses on a certain type of abstraction. And we don't see a lot of layering. Instead, we see individual artifacts or individual natural forms. A lot of her work, as you can see, is made from natural forms. And as her work progresses and as she matures as an artist, say here in 2003 and beyond, her works become much more layered, and also the narrative in her work really changes, becomes much more complex. The way I see it in terms of focusing less on, say, a single portrait, rather than building a story, essentially. So it's really amazing to see this progression of Charlotte as an artist and the work that she created, not just in terms of the forms that she used, the media that she used, but also, I think, the visual stories that she was trying to tell. So there's a binder, I think it might be on the table there, that has detailed information about Charlotte Lewis, her life, her work, and also her contributions to Artwise. And so if you wanted to take a look at that, I encourage you to do so. But I would love to hear from you and hear your recollections of Charlotte and maybe your experiences with her, maybe if you had anyone seen her in creating her work, or perhaps directly engage with her as she was working on a piece, or maybe after she completed some work. Well, maybe I think it'd be, oh yeah, great.
I started at the Art Museum in '96, and of course after our great flood, we restarted the winter concert series, and of course string quartets and symphony, parts of the symphony and things like that. So that's when I first saw this little tiny old lady coming to every concert until she passed away, almost. And then I do recall, and she usually sat fairly close up front. And of course, Laurel knew her and would sit by her sometimes, and they'd visit. She did enter, if I remember right, at least 2 or 3 times into the auctions. So that's where I remember seeing her pieces. I don't think the museum owns, in their collection, has one of her actual pieces. But she did sell through our art auction. So that's how they got around town too. Also, I worked with the artist who took the wonderful photograph of her for a show that was done about Minnesota, or Valley in Minnesota, folk artists, as they were called, outsider artists and things like that. So I was trying to remember, I think I actually framed that for the exhibit. So it's held up, I guess. But I thought it was very impressive the way Vance put that together too for the photograph.
Portrait really captures her identity as a musician and an artist, and includes the I'm terrible at botany, so I don't know what this is, but at any rate, the wide leaf really focusing on the medium that she's over. Now, Greg, you bring up a really important point and concept in your comments, and that is the fact that Charlotte was considered an outsider artist. So do you guys know what that term means? Mary, of course, yeah. Is that familiar to everybody? Outsider?
Not really.
Not really? Okay. So what outsider art means is that artists who do not have formal art training and sometimes work in more traditional or kind of outside of traditional art forms, traditional art media. And traditional art media would be like oil paints or acrylic paints or wood pencils or types of sculpture that focus on, say, wood or metals or things like that. So being an outsider artist or a folk artist, it basically has this designation that you're outside of the art world, essentially. So Charlotte was trained as a musician, as a cellist, and in her artist statement, for example, she said, "I'm not actually a trained artist. This is not my training. I'm a musician, but I was drawn to art." And so the word outsider can seem to have like negative connotations, essentially, but so that word essentially in the art historical realm, if you will, has kind of changed to folk art or a non-traditional artist. And the word outsider art is still used, but again, because that it seems like they're outside, right? They're not in the canon of art history.
She literally was outside most of the time.
Yeah, I'm sure you are.
Gathering all her leaves and
Wonderful.
Yeah.
I just want to say the Empire Art Center did a show for her, an exhibit of hers in 1998, 1999, I kind of think it was 99. And I went to her house on Belmont to pick up her artwork, and her artwork filled both the galleries. She had big pieces, small pieces, everything. And she would tell me, at the time that she knows that, traditional gallery people don't like her use of contact paper. In the 80s and 90s, she would lay down contact paper, she'd make her, which I don't know how she kept the contact paper, controlled it, but she did. And she would lay out her image, and then she would put contact paper on top. I noticed after 2000, she did not use contact paper anymore. She's found some kind of adhesive that she liked, and she started using that. Yeah, that's and that's one of the bigger works that I've seen in this time frame. I kept saying, Imperial will attest, where is all her art? Where is all her art? But I was reading over some information that Marlene Stiles gave us, and after her passing, Marlene had set up an art sale, and it was to benefit Circle of Friends. So, that's where all of her work is. People grabbed it, and, so I just think that was so interesting. Her art and her philanthropy kind of intertwined, most of the time. So it was kind of neat. Yeah.
What a wonderful story, Rita.
Yeah.
And I love that. One of the things you mentioned was her use of contact paper. And that I can see why it would be really challenging for museum professionals or conservators. And the reason is, I would imagine, because it's not archival.
Right.
And so it would degrade over time. It wouldn't have, say, protection against the UV rays, for example, and could deteriorate over time.
Yeah.
And plus it could yellow and become maybe a little brittle,
Yeah.
even over time. And so I can really see that. So here she must be using, this looks like she's using an archival.
Yeah. The
adhesive.
paper and the adhesive, I think.
Yeah,
But all of the art materials are natural.
they're natural.
She did not use, well, her rules for herself was nothing that's not natural.
Yeah.
She has a little vignette over there beside, to the left of her photo, and with the dark sky. That was charcoal that she made.
Oh, really?
From burning.
Fire, yeah.
Yeah. So nothing was used that wasn't, from that. So it's kind of interesting problem to give herself.
I wonder, does anyone know about this when Charlotte Lewis's work was first recognized, where she was recognized as an artist? Because typically when you see like artists who are considered outsider artists, they're working on their own, right? And they're working outside of the art world. They're not showing their works in galleries or in museums, or even trying to sell their artwork. And they'll collect or amass a huge amount of their own work for the joy of creating, right? And so I'm wondering if that was the case with Charlotte. It seems like from Rita's story that might be the case.
Well, where I met her was, my mom used to deal in antiques, and there was an antique craft and art show at the Maple Lake Pavilion. And I think they had them until recently, but my mom I was there with my mother because she was doing her antiques, walking around, and Charlotte was at a table with a friend and had all these leaf arts. And at that time, most everything I ever saw of her work was cats. Cats, that's all I saw. And the reason I was interested in that, it wasn't a cat. And so I picked it up, and on the back it said NFS. And I was looking for the price, it said NFS. So I said, well, how much is this? I didn't know. So she shot me a price, and I bought it.
Well, that's wonderful. It's good to ask, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a long time.
Yeah.
But yeah, mine has the contact paper. But I recall seeing her at, the flea markets, the craft and art shows, art supplies.
Yeah. Wonderful.
I think she had won some awards. I know that she was artist of the year for Fergus Falls.
Oh, okay, great.
One year. She won some awards in the Devil's Lake area. So people recognized, that her work was important. 2001, the Lincoln Avenue Festival, that's the Fine Arts Festival in Fergus Falls. Yeah. And so they recognized even as she was working. She also got a lot of press from Harold, but I saw it. I know. I'd love to know how she does that, but I saw this article. I know, yeah. This article, it was talking about how she got involved with the Community Arts Association. I had forgotten all about that group.
That's right.
But they really encouraged her to move into more scenes, and because she was doing cards, she was doing small, but they kind of encouraged her and, told her it was art,
That's generally how it works with outsider artists, someone inside the art world,
Yeah.
a curator or a museum member, gallery member or something sees someone's work and they say, you should have this in a gallery. You should be seeing it,
People need to
showing
see
it.
this.
So that's what happens usually.
That is wonderful.
Yeah.
I do Charlotte mostly from Amazing Grace. She's a co-op member. Actually, I think the first time she was a board member.
I'm so glad to
Really?
see you.
Back in about 1992 or
Oh
something.
my goodness.
We used to save onion skins for her.
Oh,
Only the red ones, and they fade because that cat was a red onion.
oh, too bad. Non-archival.
Well, it fades anyway, but.
And it's,
Yes.
the next one, you're talking about madness, that one is very much.
Yeah, that's a
Absolutely.
beautiful.
And that cat was an onion skin?
Yeah,
Oh my goodness.
onion skin mache, yeah.
Is it like one piece?
No,
Or
it's like paper mache,
paper mache,
Just
okay.
built up.
only onion skin is.
I'm so impressed. Wow. That's great, Betsy.
And I also knew her a little bit as a cellist. My son was a cellist, and there was a cello flyer with 8 cellists together. She was the oldest, and Doug was probably the youngest in high school. And sometimes we gave her a ride, which meant three bodies and 2 cellos.
That's a lot. The cellos. Oh my goodness, yes. Well, thank you so much, Betsy, for sharing that. And I especially like that you mentioned that you would save onion skins for her, and how it's almost like a community event, you know, like making this
Oh,
art.
we had so many onion skins, but you can get a 30-pound box of onions in, and pull the onions out, and you're left with over just.
Absolutely. You're like, I know just where this should go. So, that's wonderful. Thank
She
you for
brought
sharing.
so much, so many natural things for the kids to use. All years she's at the Artwise art show with them. They can take table.
Can you share, Mary, like what would she do as a make and take?
Well, she just had all of her things out and she invited the kids to make something.
Did she use contact paper? Did they glue it down?
I think she had her things already pressed with the contact paper.
Oh, okay.
Cut
And then
shapes.
they could cut out.
I
See,
might be
that's a
wrong.
smart way to do that.
I might be wrong.
No, but the next step would be to just move to Elmer's glue.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Elmer's glue is actually fairly archival.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an animal base, so it's it doesn't have all that acid stuff in it like synthetic.
Even after they changed its formulation.
I didn't check on that.
It cost bottles, I spent half my
I
life.
know, clogging glue.
I was an elementary art teacher.
Yeah.
With the arrival of Pat, aka Cat Lady, makes me think of how I just know of all your watercolors of cats. That how much Charlotte left her cats, and I've never met any of her cats. She must have had them put away when I was in her home. But Betsy VC has told me when she moved to the Metropolitan, the lofts, she had a big old ladder in the middle of her living space for the cats to climb and go up and down and all that. Betsy said, you should bring a ladder in. And I'm like, how many people do you think will know that reference? It is a good story.
Terrio, do you have a ladder for your cats?
I don't have ladder, but I have some other climbing. We have a pole that's made with step
Pat, I'm so glad you joined us. We are sharing stories of our experiences with Charlotte. Did you have anything you'd like to share?
Well, I didn't, I was such a fan of her art and of her music, and I was lucky enough to buy one of her little pieces, and I was wishing I could find it to get it here. If I find it, I'll bring it. It is so simple. It's just a leaf painting, you know, of the back view of a cat sitting on a blue background. It's just very sweet. I just love it.
That was beautiful.
Plus, I lost her.
I wonder what she used for the blue.
I don't know what it was mounted on. I don't remember. various moves and things in my life.
Oh, absolutely. In the world of art, blue is a really important color. And in art history especially, if you look at, say, Christian art from the early Christian, medieval world, the Byzantine world, blue is representative of usually the Virgin Mary or something like super, super important because it was made from lapis lazuli, stone ground into pigment. And lapis lazuli was only quarried in the mines of Afghanistan, and so it's extremely precious. So thinking about blue and kind of natural elements, how she may have used those. I mean, if some sort of reference perhaps to that symbolic reference of blue. Good to know. So, yeah. Thank you so much, Anne, for sharing. Kate, I don't think we've heard from you. Do you have anything you'd like to share?
I didn't know her, but I worked for a while for a magazine called Plainswoman, which some of you might remember. And Elizabeth Hampston was the editor, and she knew Charlotte. And so we had one of her, I don't remember which one, but it was a leaf painting as the cover for Plainswoman at one point. And then later someone gave me that small Pete Seeger one up there, which I really loved.
Is that from your collection?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing it here.
One has to wonder what her attraction to Pete Seeger was.
She must
She's
have
got
had
two.
one.
I know, she has two now.
Well, I
One in the
think I
80s, one in the 90s.
Thank you so
I
much.
know.
Erica, did you have any stories you'd like to share?
I never knew her.
Okay. Rita, your story about how Charlotte had won an award in 2001 from, is it the Fergus Falls Art Center?
And she was like a featured artist. She was on a t-shirt.
And I just want to say,
Strong arts community.
Yeah, it really is. That's, yeah.
yes,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
And I think I just want to mention that I think that gives hope to all of us because in 2001 she was 84 years old. And to be recognized as the featured artist is is a wonderful recognition. And she has received recognition in some capacity throughout her career, but I think the recognition really ramped up toward the last couple decades of her life. And we are just so grateful that you all have shared work here and that we can showcase her work and remember her for all of the amazing work that she has done. And I find her work incredibly inspiring. I don't really myself work in natural objects. Does anyone else here work with natural media or say collage or? You dabble, okay.
Nothing to share with anybody.
Yeah. It's really difficult, right? In part because the materials are so delicate and change over time as the organic materials changes, as it maybe decomposes or maybe desiccates or what have you.
Actually, we did get a box full of leaves from Madeline Campbell. I went to look for because we forgot to put it out. But anyway, so she collected and she had them in books. And Marlene showed me she has a book full of leaves and things what she collected together with Charlotte. But this book actually Marlene gave to Madeline to use for Madeline's art because Madeline is using mixed media, collage, so she was, but Madeline didn't use it anyway. So we do have a box of leaves and when we were putting this up, we were, sorry, we are going to put it up over here. People can add. Madeline's idea was that we would do some artwork with children, but maybe one day. So there is still in a community, there is a leaves collective by Charlotte.
Curio, thank you so much for sharing that. I want to just mention that Curio is an artist as well, but she is not an outsider artist. So, is that right? Would you characterize that like you?
It's
No,
an
she's
outsider
not.
artist.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got a couple here in the group.
Yeah, that is kind of that outsider artist is a little bit, it's, I think art world is a little bit expanding.
I think so too, yeah,
It's
really
not
is changing.
It's not so,
Yeah,
so strict anymore.
absolutely. It's really been the last couple of decades or so where the art world essentially has really expanded its vocabulary and become more inclusive in that way, instead of saying that outsider, again, you mentioned it has a kind of negative connotation. So we have other artists here. Oh, sorry, Victoria, go ahead.
I think that what you were talking about, that folk art,
Yes.
I think that's a little bit, what does it then mean? On the other hand, folk means, I don't know. but it's really, yeah.
Yeah. And in the period that we're in now, right? We're past basically a modern period. We're in a postmodern period, and it's a very different way of viewing artwork. And I think this is why we've had such an expansion of this idea of what folk art is and how we should change the definition of outsider art. And one of the major things that's happened in terms of how people understand art and how people perceive art is that there's a recognition that it's not so much about the artist voice, right? It's not so much about like what the artist is intending, but rather it's about how the viewer makes sense of that work and how when a work gets put out into public space, the artist kind of loses that control, right? In terms of the story or the narrative that they're trying to portray, and the viewer brings in their own experiences and then develops their own meaning. And so this idea that you can designate someone as an outsider artist, right, really comes from that modernist perspective that there's this one way of looking at art, one way of understanding art. Is much today it's a much more pluralist kind of view of art. That's my art history lesson today. I'll stop.
And also there's kind of nowadays discussion a lot about this, especially women artists who are well known when they are showing and known when they are living, but then history kind of forgets them.
Absolutely.
And yeah, it is, and then there's no stories of them afterwards. Like let's say Charlotte had a presence in this community and was showing, but then now, when we started to put ways darker, ways the stories, it's hard to find that, but this is not the only one.
Absolutely.
Kind of like this experience. Of course, we can't remember everybody. In the other hand, we should.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We should never remember everybody, but it's kind of like that. That what is happening, history forgets easily.
That's right. That very narrowly defined idea of what art is, right? So art is certain art is by certain people. Art is by a certain story that's being told, and it excludes women artists essentially. So in my art history classes, I like to tell my students, I bring in art history survey textbooks from the 1980s, 1990s even, and say, take a look at this art history textbook. There are no women artists, right? At all, included in this textbook. And today it's very different. So there's a real effort to include women artists, but there's a long way to go.
Plus, again, they are not written in the books, but they were showing and celebrating when they were living and showing them. And then suddenly they, of course there is the two which are showing and celebrating just, during their lifetime, but then for whatever reason they didn't establish foundation. They didn't, they mistake didn't, they just sold all the work and nobody, how can I say, nobody is making money out of it. Some collector has collected, let's say, so many pieces, and now let's make the name, and I can invest in, that's the sad part of the story.
That's right.
I know, that's one thing I kept saying is, I hope it's not moldering away somewhere. You just see it in boxes sitting there.
But this could be, for your art, your art history students.
Oh,
Write a
absolutely.
story about Charlotte.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Yeah.
This has been wonderful, and I think we have heard everyone except, and forgive me, I don't remember your name.
Oh, Lori, I'm just.
Lori. Yes, did you have anything you wanted to share?
No,
Okay, sure.
We're together.
Well, I am so grateful to Rita and the ArtWise staff for organizing this wonderful show and really capturing the legacy of Charlotte Lewis, and for everyone who contributed work through our collections to be on view here. Now, I wanted to first just ask if anyone had any questions or comments before we start to wrap up. Okay. I also wanted to spend a little bit of time just remembering Charlotte for her philanthropy and her giving spirit. Now, you had mentioned that in trying to search for her works, you realized that, some of these works were given or sold off essentially for charitable purposes. And of course, her contributions to ArtWise in the form of an endowment have ensured essentially the longevity of this organization, especially during the turbulent times of the past few years with the transition away from the public school system. So
She started that endowment for arts anonymously. I forget, do you know the year? I want to say 2000.
I'm thinking, maybe.
2000.
I don't know.
It was early.
Yeah.
And we.
I'll keep saying, I was out of the state.
Right. I thought maybe you had it in the records, but it was early.
Yeah, it was, I think it was, because it was
It was under
when the
Sue Ann
community,
Fraser's.
when the community foundation really was building.
Yeah.
So that's,
Patty.
she saw a way to, perpetuate, and she did.
But she didn't only give to ArtWise.
No.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah.
Mary, do you know when that endowment was made? It was made anonymously. When was it known that Charlotte Lewis was the benefactor?
I'm not sure when that was revealed, because I remember saying, do we know it to, I think, Sue Ann Fraser, who had been the ArtWise director at the time, and she said, well, that was Charlotte Lewis. It doesn't know that, so I was the last to know.
That was just how she did things, I think. It didn't.
Yeah. I wanted to share that there is a fundraiser for ArtWise coming up. Are you familiar with the Giving Hearts Day? Very nice. So ArtWise is participating in this fundraiser, and it is a terrific opportunity to support nonprofit organizations across the region. So, and in the spirit of Charlotte Lewis, I'm sharing this information essentially to again continue that spirit of giving. So, and I'll put this on the table if anyone's interested in learning more about it. So.
And also, if you're interested in building the endowment, we have a link on our webpage, the Charlotte Lewis page, and a link to the community foundation. So that's where any legacy giving can be.
I just learned about Giving Hearts Day recently, and I've been involved in it this year, and it's a phenomenal organization run through the Dakota Medical Foundation in Fargo, and there's about 500 charities that are involved in it. So on February 9th, you'll probably see a lot of information about Giving Hearts Day. So.
Your Facebook page will be loaded with Giving Hearts Day.
That's right.
Red. So, well, thank you.
Yeah, thank
Nicole.
you.
Appreciate you
Nicole,
coming.
Of course, yes.
Helping us celebrate.
Yes, it's always my joy and pleasure to talk with you about the artists and the artwork, and I'm hoping Marlene Stiles feels better. She was sick today, why she couldn't join us, so I'm wishing her a speedy recovery. And